Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Planning and Development Council of the Town of Oakville. Wrong document. Flip over. There we go. Tonight we have several public hearing items, and you need to know that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submission to the Town of Oakville in respect of a proposed official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and/or plan of subdivision or condominium, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of Town Council to the Ontario Municipal Board and may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Municipal Board unless, in the opinion of the Board, there are reasonable grounds to do so. We have regrets this evening from Councillor Grant and Councillor Knoll. Do we have any declarations of pecuniary interest? Thank you. We could now resolve into committee of the whole. Councillor Duddock and Councillor Khan, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Being in committee of the whole relaxes our rules and permits greater discussion and questioning. And the first things before us on the agenda tonight are the consent items, number 1 and 2. Councillor Johnston moves the consent items. We no longer need a seconder. Any separations or discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? The consent items are adopted. We have no confidential consent items, and we have several public hearing items, 3 public hearing items. The first is the public meeting report for 1455 Joshua's Creek Drive, official plan amendment, zoning amendment, and plan of subdivision. This is a report from Planning Services Department. And with that, if we turn our attention to Paul Demchuk, he will summarize the report that Council's already read so that the public has a better appreciation of what we're doing here. Paul, we're all ears. We're going to need a little bit of technical here, a little more volume.
Test? We good? Okay.
Now we can hear you.
All right, Mayor Burton, members of council. The town is in receipt of 3 applications tonight related to this public meeting: a zoning bylaw amendment, official plan amendment, and a draft plan of subdivision. The lands are located at 1455 Joshua Creek Drive. They are bounded by Upper Middle Road East to the north, Joshua Creek Drive to the west, the existing cul-de-sac of 9th Line to the east, and to the south is North Service Road East. Related to this subdivision application includes the lands, the town lands being the Joshua Creek Arena. And just quickly, just to note that currently the site is being used as a driving range and mini putt golf course. The plan of subdivision would incorporate a public road connection, which would connect Joshua Creek Drive as well as the North Service Road that would extend through more or less the middle of the site. And that would also include a potential land exchange with a portion of the lands that the town owns, being the Joshua Creek Arena. I will touch on that a little bit later in my presentation. In terms of the plan of subdivision, it would also incorporate 2 commercial blocks, being on the northwest corner of the site, as well as 2 employment blocks, 2 open space blocks, and the blocks for the land exchange. Now, this concept plan is a little difficult to see, so I'll kind of hone in on a few portions of the site. But this is the conceptual plan that they proposed. Incorporated in this includes over 7,000 square meters of business commercial land uses, over 37,000 square meters of office uses, and approximately 16,000 square meters of warehouse industrial uses. Specifically for the commercial blocks located in the northwest corner of the site, they're broken up into 2 blocks. And based on the proposal, there's roughly, this is the 7,000 business commercial square meters for business and commercial uses, of which 5,000, the applicant is proposing roughly 5,000 square meters of convenience retail to be equally divided over the 2 blocks. So that would be the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications related to this portion of the site. And this is the conceptual plan, just kind of zoomed in on that portion of the conceptual site plan, being the darker yellow. These are the blocks 6 and 13. This relates to the proposed land exchange. Specifically, block 13 is the existing Joshua Creek Arena, and the applicant's proposing to, through the plan of subdivision, to merge block 6 with block 13 to substitute for the loss of parking to give parking at currently the rear of the Joshua Creek Arena, and that would accommodate for the proposed road connection between Joshua Creek Drive and the North Service Road. And that conceptually shows how the plan would be laid out. In terms of the official plan, the lands are designated as business employment and open space. The zoning, the property is zoned E1 on the northern portion. It has an H, well, both portions of the site have a holding provision related to servicing. The northern portion has a site special provision 358, and the southern portion has a special provision 836. In terms of the special provisions, the northern portion specifically currently bans drive-throughs and automobile-related uses. In terms of issues and comments that staff have raised so far, this includes potential conformity with the Livable Oakville official plan related to the proposed business commercial uses and potential employment area conversion, potential commercial land use impacts related to existing commercial lands to the east of the site and what impacts this proposal would have on those lands. Traffic impacts, including the final location of the North Service Road and the proposed public street intersection, which is subject to MTO approval, as well as the potential land exchange between the arena parking lot and the applicant's lands. In terms of next steps, staff will complete the analysis of the application and bring forward a future recommendation report to council. So for this report, staff are recommending that comments be received. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Adams.
Thank you very much for the report, and I appreciate the discussions we've had previously on the matter. Yeah, I agree with the matters to be considered. There's a couple more that I'd like to add in there. They're already partially commented on, but with respect to the traffic impacts, specifically the traffic impact on Upper Middle Road and the access points to the property, as well as the left turn lane, or the left turn lane from Upper Middle Road on the westbound to Joshua's Creek Drive are points of special interest that I'd like to make sure are functioning properly. We do have issues with people trying to do right-hand turns at Upper Middle Road going north and then doing a U-turn to come back down south. So there's an issue there, and the region is currently going through an EA process for Upper Middle Road, and I'd like to make sure that this particular process jives with the EA process going on at the region. That process, as I understand it, the next round of stakeholder advisory group meetings is to take place in the fall, so there's still lots of lead time on that particular EA. So I'm not sure how long this process will take compared to that, but if we can get the comments, that would be helpful. The other is on the arena. Can we make sure that we touch base with the arena user groups specifically? I know that we've got our recreational staff involved, but I'd like to make sure that the heavy users of that arena are asked their comment with respect to the design. And I'd like there to be a net benefit to the arena users in any change. Okay?
Thank you, Councillor Adams.
Thank you.
Councillor Khan.
Just to follow up with what Councillor Adams was saying as well, what about a traffic impact study on Ford Drive? Because that's usually a high impact area during the peak hours. Are we going to be looking at that? Have we considered that? Is the applicant reviewing that at this point?
Through you, Your Worship. To be honest, I think that currently as the traffic impact study is being reviewed, I'm not sure if it deals with specifically Ford Drive. I can look into that and confirm with development engineering if that is being reviewed.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Are there members of the public with information for council here? Or is Mr. Darnell, Mr. Lambert, do you have something for the councillor? Sorry, didn't see you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that intersection will be assessed as part of this. There is a proposal to make a new intersection at the North Service Road and Ford Drive, and it would take into consideration any traffic volumes that would be brought on board by this proposal.
Thank you. Yeah, when you look at the map, it becomes clear that you need to do that. So where was I? Any members of the public with information for council on this matter? Once, twice, three times? Council? Councillor Adams moves the staff recommendation. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that is carried. Item number 4, the public meeting and recommendation report for North Oakville Housekeeping Zoning Bylaw Amendment 2013-48. And if we turn our attention to the podium, Leslie Gilwoods, our planner, will summarize the report council's absorbed for the benefit of the public to keep up with us here tonight. Go ahead.
Good evening. What's before you with item number 4 is a housekeeping amendment to the North Oakville zoning bylaw 2009-189, which is of course the zoning bylaw that applies to the lands north of Dundas and south of Highway 407. The proposed bylaw is a number of technical amendments that restructures the North Oakville zoning bylaw to be more user-friendly and consistent with the format of the draft new 2014 zoning bylaw that will apply to the rest of town. It's part of an ongoing initiative to streamline and improve the document, and it is a small step towards our long-term goal of having one comprehensive zoning bylaw that applies to the whole town. These tables summarize the effect of the proposed bylaw amendment before you tonight. What's important to note is that the existing permitted uses and regulations will be maintained, but zoning provisions will be renumbered and or relocated as illustrated within the new structure. The primary purpose of the amendment, though, is to create new sections for special provisions, holding or H provisions, and temporary use or T permissions. Text in Section 1, Administration, and Section 2, Establishment of Zones, will be replaced with new text to improve clarity and consistency with the draft 2014 zoning bylaw. And new zoning maps with updated zone symbols will also be introduced. This next slide just gives you a snapshot of what the new zoning symbols will look like. The performance zones that are maintained will look like this. This is the Neighborhood Center Performance Zone 4 as an example. Special provisions will now be identified with a superscript number. This is general urban, subject to special provision number 3. Holding zones are identified as they are in the new 2014 zoning bylaw with a small h. So this is holding provision H2 applying to Dundas Urban Core Performance Zone 8. And then similarly, here's holding zone 5, applying to Dundas Urban Core, subject to special provision 1. Notice of the proposed amendment appeared in the newspaper and was mailed to owners of properties subject to the affected performance zones, holding provisions, and temporary use permissions. I received a few inquiries, but there were no concerns. An electronic notice plus an invitation to an information session that we held at the end of last month was sent to all major landowners or developers in North Oakville. That information session was attended by 5 representatives of landowners and resulted in a couple of minor tweaks to wording in the proposed bylaw. So the recommendation tonight is that the report be received and that bylaw 2013-048, which makes the general amendments to North Oakville zoning bylaw 2009-189 be approved.
Thank you, Ms. Gilwoods. Questions, council? Are there members of the public with information for council on this matter? Council? Councillor Adams? Councillor Adams moves the recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is adopted. Item 5 is the public meeting and recommendation report for a temporary use bylaw extension for the Vic Hadfield Golf Center. And we'll have a summary of that for you from Gabe Charles, our manager of current planning. if you could give your attention to Mr. Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This is a statutory public meeting for an application to extend the existing permission for a temporary use bylaw for an additional 3 years. There's currently a temporary use bylaw on the subject property which lapses on the 21st of June. Property is located at the southeast of the intersection of Burnhamthorpe Road and Trafalgar Road. The whole of the property is roughly 20 hectares in size, and the golf facility takes up roughly half of that. The property currently houses the driving range, a pro shop, and a storage shed. There is no change to the existing facility proposed through the extension of the temporary use. The site plan approved by the town site plan committee in 2001 remains current and in effect. The property is designated Trafalgar Urban Core, which intends for a range of employment, commercial, residential uses, among others. But the secondary plan also permits the continued operation of non-conforming uses, recognizing that once market conditions suggest redevelopment is imminent, that use will then cease. The property is currently zoned as existing development. There's an overlying temporary use permission for the driving range. That original approval was conducted in 2001, and there have been a couple of extensions, 3-year extensions since that time in 2004, 7, and 2010. Staff has not received public comments on the application or any objection on the proposal from circulated agencies and departments. Staff recommend that the extension be granted and 2013-053 be passed. If there are any questions, be pleased to answer those.
Thank you, Mr. Charles. Council, are there any questions? Councillor Khan?
Just moving the recommendation. Pardon me.
Are there members of the public with information for council on this matter? Councillor Khan? Councillor Khan moves the staff recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. That brings us now this evening to our discussion items. And first up is the Merton Planning Study update. And if you will turn your attention to our planning director, Dana Anderson, she will summarize where we've gotten to at this point in terms of this update. Ms. Anderson, we are all ears.
Right there. Thank you, Your Worship and members of Council. Tonight I'm pleased to bring you an update on the Merton Planning Study, which is found at page 97 of your agenda. There's a brief staff report that provides some background to the study, some details about the work completed to date, some of the summarized input that we've received to date from the recent open houses, and sets out the next steps in the study. The Merton Planning Study, as you may recall, was initiated in the fall of 2012, and there was a staff report at that time received by Council, which outlined the background information relating to the study, the proposed process steps, and the objectives that would guide that process. I'm showing an indication of the Merton Planning Study area that's under review. And I wanted to just reiterate the importance of why we are doing this study. There are, as you know, a number of decisions that have been made relating to these lands. Some of them involve provincial policy related to the Parkway Belt West Plan. Others involve the region's current plan as well as ROPA 38. There are several livable Oakville policies that direct the requirement to study these lands. There's also a number of decisions that have been made by landowners, the two major landowners being Saw Wet Golf Course as well as Infrastructure Ontario, who own the majority of the lands in this area. The town's livable Oakville policies recognize that these lands and the applicable policies will change and require that any changes not proceed until the town determines what the appropriate land uses and policies should be. So just to reiterate that this study allows the town the ability to maintain the control and certainty for the long-term use of these lands through the comprehensive study approach. I also wanted to recognize that I believe you were provided with additional materials with the staff update report. There are two letters that you would have received. One is from the newly formed 14 Mile Creek Residents Association, which provides a very detailed overview of their comments. And it also includes their proposed option moving forward. And there's also a detailed letter from Oakville Green providing their comments on the study. In terms of where we're at with the study process itself, as I mentioned, staff completed quite a large amount of background work in terms of preparation for the study, and we proceeded with finalizing a terms of reference for the technical studies, and that terms of reference was developed by the town in consultation with the region and Conservation Halton and other agencies, and it sets out all of the requirements for the technical studies. The town also developed some preliminary concepts for options and held an open house on May 15th and 16th, which had considerable attendance from members of the community. We're here this evening to just provide you with an update and respond to any questions. And we will be proceeding with additional consultation. As following this meeting, we do intend to meet with the groups to date who have provided comments to discuss with them their comments, as well as the process of developing ongoing online consultation, which can take place over the summer months. It's our intention in the fall to come forward with a further update to council and also to host a further open house, at which time we'll be able to present a preferred option for the lands. And so again, this is just an ownership map providing an overview of the major landowners. The recommendation for you this evening is to receive the report, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Council, questions? Councillor Elgar.
First of all, thank you very much for the update of this. A few questions. Back in November last year, Brian Burton presented to us a lot of information which we as a council had no knowledge of, and I don't know whether staff had any knowledge of the optimal use report that was prepared by Infrastructure Ontario back at the end of 2011. And I wonder, has staff been able to receive that report to date and to provide it to councillors?
No, my understanding of that report is that it was prepared by consultants for Infrastructure Ontario. I believe, has been made available through Freedom of Information request, and we currently do not have a copy. My understanding is for us to obtain a copy, we're required to sign a confidentiality agreement with Infrastructure Ontario, for which we would not have any intention to do, because our intention would be to have that information as public information. So we do not have a copy, nor do we have any direction to proceed to obtain a copy or sign a confidentiality agreement.
And yet a resident in the municipality in Ward 4 has a copy of the report. He has the environmental site assessment and the archaeological assessment as well, and we have nothing. Okay, that's not good. I'm not going to go through the two letters you've received, because I think they have been unbelievably well written and really get to the point. But there is one concern, and it has to do with it was the Oakville Green letter. It talks about the restoration of a significant meadowland. And it refers to Dr. Pereira, who's been studying that 14 Mile Creek for years. And somehow there's this meadow that supports an insect and rodent population that fed the fish, amphibians, reptilian, and avian species. And we've just learned that apparently it's been plowed. So I guess they're starting to farm the Saw-Wet Golf Course now. Do you have any knowledge of that?
I'm not aware if they're farming that particular area. There is currently lands within the Saw-Wet course that are subject to a matter before the Ontario Municipal Board. The lands in both the region's plan and the town's plan are identified as environmentally sensitive area, and as such are located within our environmental constraints mapping and are also shown on the region's ROPA 38 maps as being protected. My understanding is the owners of the lands sought to have the board determine that the outcome in relation to those lands and the designations be before the board to be argued, because they did not have that ability. So there was a motion before the Ontario Municipal Board at the recent mediation hearings, for which there is no decision at this time. But both the regional staff and the town staff supported their existing policies protecting that area. But I'm not aware that it's being farmed. My understanding, as I recall from attending the site, which would have been in the late fall on a site visit with town staff and agencies, was that the area had been plowed, but whether or not it is being actively farmed, I don't know.
I've got an email that tells me that the environmental consultant for the developers has stated that it's being used for agriculture. So I'm wondering, should we maybe rezone that saw-wet golf course for agriculture? I guess that is an option going forward then that you would consider?
Well, it is currently protected under the town's plan as part of the environmental area, so I don't think we would consider an alternative use other than the protection at this stage.
Yeah, in the ESA area.
That's
But outside
correct.
of the ESA area, maybe that is an option they want to consider, I would think, based on trying to get their plow working properly. Go back a little bit. I know I did not support the study back last November, and my reason for not agreeing with going forward was an issue of prematurity. And I just want to make sure I was correct in that in our official plan, we state that we have enough land designated as residential and for business until 2031. Is that in fact correct, what I've read in the OP?
Yes, the Livable Oakville plan sets out the forecasted population and employment projections, and it identifies all of the lands designated to meet those requirements. There are a number of areas that are subject to future study, from which additional land uses and employment and population will be derived once those land uses are determined. And this is one of those areas. So should these lands be provided with land use policies that do generate additional population or employment, those would be added to the intensification targets that are identified in the plan.
But they could just as easily, depending on the results of all the studies, be environmentally sensitive areas and private open space to remain golf courses, I suppose.
If there was a decision of council, they could, staff again will make a recommendation, but the decision of council could be that there would not be any level of increase in population or employment. I would note, however, that the study objectives do identify, as does Livable Oakville, the QEW corridor for employment lands for future land use. So that is one of the study objectives, is to identify what areas are appropriate. So we will be looking at that.
That could be after the 2031 timeframe.
No, that would be as part of this study, as directed by the study objectives and by the current Livable Oakville policies.
Okay, but we do have enough land now. If nothing can be developed there, we still have enough land to meet our employment and residential numbers, correct?
We currently have land to meet the forecast requirements, correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. And since we're just receiving the report, I guess that's all I need, but I'd encourage everybody to read the 2 letters they have received. Now, it's my understanding, Ms. Anderson, there also, I think the 14-mile residents sent in a map showing what they would like to see. Could we show that perhaps on screen, if you have it? Thank you.
I believe it's attached to the back in color. Yeah.
So in their map, they want everything east of the creek to be part of the NHS, and all of Deerfield Golf Course to be part of the NHS, from what I see, and more buffer on the west side of the creek. That's what they're asking for?
I believe in this, which is their proposed option, yes.
Okay, and that will be considered going forward.
Their input, absolutely.
Thank you so much, and thanks for what you've done.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. Councillor Bird.
Councillor Elgar somewhat commented on my question, which was in the report, you seem to be receiving option A, B, and C. which have come out of page 127, 28, and 29. You've got schematics of the, which if you compare that with the table on the side, it virtually wipes out what is the current preferred, I think, use is public or private open space. I don't see, other than the valley land on any of those options, if this is what we're receiving and going for further study. Oh, and they sort of care, I want to make sure that there's other options that you, in your comments, you indicated that it'll be left up to council to have some sort of a say in a preferred option, given the comments that this is sort of futuristic or maybe considered futuristic and outside the current planning horizon as we now know it. So would there be, these are not finite that we're receiving here, there's the study or the recommendation and the schematic that we have from this newfound group, organized group, the 14 Mile Creek Association, that'll go forward as well for further study. This isn't the final three. This is just three concepts at this time, at this early stage of the study.
Yes, through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Bird, that's correct. The town presented the three options at the open house, and they're included for information in the report. Those options were developed based on the current constraints and opportunities. The options reflect a lot of the physical constraints. So they do identify the existing land uses, they identify the existing environmental features, the areas to be protected, which will be maintained. That is not changing. Also, the current policy framework, which guided some of the options, as well as cultural heritage resources, which are protected, and required public facilities, infrastructure, as well as intersection locations. So they are conceptual options at this stage. Yes, there is room for another option. The town is looking for ongoing consultation with the public based on the comments we've received to date. And the process will help us develop a preferred option to bring forward to council. So there's still a lot of work to do. We also have a significant amount of the technical background work that has to go into assessing the options in terms of those constraint areas. So these are very conceptual at this stage, and there is no one option at this stage that is being put forward. It's still very much in the study stage.
But my first impression of what we have now, or what primarily land use, which is open space, to look at all three, it looks like we're going primarily from that open space to, I guess, employment office employment uses. That's the gray hatched area. And the difference between the three options that you have seems to have to do with the road network. Am I right on looking at these?
There are some similarities between all three of the options, and one of the similarities would be the location of employment land along the QEW between the region's existing Mid-Halton plant. So that currently is within the Parkway Belt Greenlands B. It is also in our plan as Parkway Belt. That is coming off, and it's recognized as urban in the region's plan. So we have to determine the appropriate land use for that and all of the lands. Certainly the Mid-Halton plant as an industrial use would be recognized, so that would go within our employment designation. And the other lands between that and the region's existing facilities, when considered in the options, we have policies in livable Oakville that encourage the designation of employment lands along the QEW corridor, as well as an objective in this study to protect QEW corridor lands for employment. So all three options do reflect the current approved policies of livable Oakville and the study objective. Staff would be putting forward, and as I say, with the comments that have been received, a preferred plan. At that time, it may have some changes to it, depending on the input that we receive and the additional technical analysis we do. But council has the decision to determine, based on the best advice and other input, what the appropriate land use designation should be.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. Others? I'd just like to, because an email was circulated about this meeting that said that we were meeting, quote, to accept the report recommending this rezoning, I think it's worth underlining what the planning director has just clarified, which is that in no wise or way are we accepting any such rezoning at this time. And if you'd listened carefully to the planning director, the planning department has not narrowed their position down yet either. This is an interim report, an update on the process to date. And those listening carefully will have heard the planning director say that in addition to A, B, and C, which are the draft options that the planning department has been talking to the public about, this one, which we received from the Residents Association, will also be considered as the work proceeds. She also said that planning staff are open to additional options as their work may lead them. So I hope that that deconfuses anybody who was taken in by that email. I think just for one more clarification, I think I'd turn to the planning director and ask, Ms. Planning Director, would you please explain who has the say over retention or non-retention of the Parkway Belt? Because this email also was very concerned that council retain the Parkway Belt. And you've already indicated that our official plan has policies with regard to the future of the Parkway Belt. Perhaps you could refresh people. This email also said that the Merton lands were, quote, designated as green space by the Bill Davis government, unquote. And so these two things, what was it really designated as, and what are the permitted uses in that area, and what has been the history of the Parkway Belt that's led us to, in our official plan, to adopt the policy that we have on the treatment of Parkway Belt? Could you just help people understand this very important foundational piece? And I may come back for one final point after that.
Yes, through you, Your Worship. The lands are designated in our plan as the Parkway Belt West Plan. And those lands are identified in that provincial legislation, and that provincial legislation is the in-force policies for those lands. The town is just recognizing and actually directs through the designation that you go to the Parkway Belt Plan to look at the governing policies. At this stage, there have been a number of requests which are made to the province, to the minister, to remove lands from the Parkway Belt. Those requests have been provided to the province in the past, and the town comments on them. And in due course, the town provides an underlying land use designation, and those lands are removed from the Parkway Belt by the province, and that decision is made by the minister. The Parkway Belt itself, as you know, is a provincial plan from 1978. It applies to various lands still throughout the town. And the Parkway Belt lands are used for a number of purposes. In addition to the linked open space framework, there are also environmental lands. There's also urban areas and corridors where utilities are placed, which is present on the Merton site. And there's also land that's reserved for future flexibility for linear facilities and what's referred to in the Parkway Belt Plan as unanticipated activities. So there are many lands over time since 1978 that are no longer required by the province, and they are sought to be removed, and then they are sold. And I think in the original report to council in the fall, we provided a summary in this area of the number of lands, including Saw Wet, that have been removed from the Parkway Belt and therefore given appropriate land use designations in both the region and the local plan. So at this stage, the Parkway Belt Plan does continue to apply to certain lands that are owned by Infrastructure Ontario and other owners. Infrastructure Ontario has made a request to the province to remove those lands, as have some other landowners. The region, through its new official plan, has recognized that the lands can come out of the Parkway Belt and has designated them as natural heritage and urban. So through this process, the town is responding to provide an appropriate land use in its local plan to those lands which are identified as urban, and of course will continue to protect the lands in the natural heritage system. So we are, through this process, also providing the local decisions as to what the future land use will be.
Okay, thank you very much. So, can I just finish? So in fine, do I understand you correctly that we actually have a policy in our official plan that directs us to replace the Parkway Belt West in order to get, with our own regulation, in order to get better protection for our interests in these lands?
That's correct. We do have an approved policy that states that.
Thank you. And that policy was adopted unanimously by council. Councillor Elgar, you have more questions?
Yeah, just to get clarification on the Parkway Belt West lands, just to make sure that everybody understands that that area primarily was put in the Parkway Belt West. There are 4 reasons why it can be put in, but it was actually reason number 4, which was primarily for residential purposes and recreational purposes, as I understand, when the leases were signed. Is that correct?
I don't believe so, because there are utilities that are located within that location, as well as the region's Mid-Halton treatment plant, so there may be other complementary uses that were anticipated. So there are a number of reasons that those lands were protected. There is a hydro corridor that runs through that's being maintained.
I absolutely, I agree, but it's relative to the land mass, and the amount of land for the hydro corridor is much less than the natural heritage system, like for the 14-mile creek that we have got leased until 2040, like the ESA.
The majority of the land's on the east side, yes.
Right. And I understand, though, if you read the lease, it was for recreational purposes, the Deerfield Golf Course?
I don't have information related to the Deerfield lease.
Okay.
I've been advised for those questions to consult Infrastructure Ontario.
Okay, and apparently the lease, it ends there on March of 2022. So, okay, thank you.
So, Councillor, if you look at the map of the area, you'll find a wide number of uses, all of which are contemplated in the Parkway Belt West plan. If you go to the municipal, if you go to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing website to read the plan there, you'll see all those uses, including the recreational uses. And I believe you'll find that there was no narrowing of the designation there. And you can discern that by just looking at the fact that you've got major utilities there, both at the top where the transmission corridor is, and at the bottom where you have the wastewater treatment plant.
I guess I'm just referring, I'm not going to talk about all the leases, but Article 1 lease summary states in Article F, use of the leased lands which the town has until 2040. The lands permitted by this lease, a public park comprising a trail system and a baseball diamond on the terms and conditions outlined in Article 9 of this lease. So it was pretty specific in our lease that we have until 2040.
Councillor, there's no dispute about our lease, but I wasn't discussing a lease. I was discussing the province's policies of the Parkway Belt West.
Yeah, and I was just highlighting the Parkway Belt West does include exactly the public park composing, the trail system, the passive trail system, and that is, they specify what you can do in our lands.
Yes, but the lease is not the plan. The plan is bigger than the lease. The lease is under the plan. That's the only point. I'm glad we understand that the same way. All right. I understand we have some registered delegations for this matter. Madam Clerk, would you call the registered delegations?
Our first delegation to this matter is Diane Burton.
Welcome, Ms. Burton. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. Good evening to our members of the Oakville Planning and Development Council. My name is Diane Burton, and I am speaking to you this evening regarding the amendment before you now that requests the staff recommendation that the report PD 04413 dated May 17th, 2013 be approved to be received. Approval of receiving this study is a vote to proceed with the planning options as are designated by these plans. These are the plans known as the Merton Land Studies, which are now underway by our planning staff to plan out the development of approximately 500 acres of publicly owned Parkway Belt West lands and the rural lands of the rural acres of the third line lands. All these lands are to be wrapped up in a bundle with about 132 acres of rural private lands of the Salwet Golf Course to facilitate quick rezoning and development plans of all these lands at once. That was in the report. However, if any of these three development options put forward in this study is adopted, then approximately 400 to 500 acres of publicly owned green infrastructure will be paved over. The acreage is approximate because some of the open lands are hazard lands, and the exact designation of each use is not really set out in the plans. I'm requesting this evening that you, the Planning and Development Council, vote against receiving these plans, and please send them back to the Planning Department with instructions to put this study back on the shelf as an unneeded plan. The current requirements for development lands in Oakville have been allocated up to the year 2031. So consideration of turning these green lands into development lands is a choice, not a requirement. Implementing the plans of the Merton Land Study is also a contradiction of the Oakville Environmental Strategic Plan 2005 to 2012, goal number 1. The ESP since 2005 seeks to preserve and enhance the natural heritage and biodiversity of Oakville. The Parkway Belt West zoning designation, now under discussion, was put in place in 1978 to mitigate the urban sprawl that was even then enveloping the GTA. It is similar in intent to the current Ontario Greenbelt zoning. Most of the Parkway Belt in the GTA has already been rezoned. And in Oakville, our mayor and a majority of council have planned to dispose of the rest of this open expanse of public lands since 2009. It was a shock to find out that the Livable Oakville Plan states in section D1913, page 33, the town will encourage the province to continue to remove land subject to Parkway Belt West Plan from its jurisdiction. Any such land will then be under the jurisdiction of the plan of the town and this plan unless superseded by another provincial plan. The jurisdiction of Oakville calls for most of these lands to be paved out for residential and light industrial development. But these are publicly owned land, reserved as open space, and it is the electoral mandate of the Oakville Council to preserve Oakville's green infrastructure, not facilitate it for selling out for development. I would like to suggest to you that this part of the Livable Oakville Plan and the resultant Merton Land Study Plan for future implementation is completely incompatible with the electoral mandate given to council by the citizens of Oakville in 2006 and 2010. The results of surveys of Oakville citizens then and now still put the present preservation of our green and natural spaces, plus protecting the biodiversity of our Indigenous flora and fauna as a first priority the town administration is expected to achieve. Paving over hundreds of acres of protected, publicly owned open space and precious nature land is not acceptable to the citizens of Oakville. Destroying affordable, accessible local golfing recreation by paving over 2 such last golf courses in Oakville is not acceptable to the citizens of Oakville. If you strip out all but 120 of acres of green from 700 acres of green, you will kill off 80% of the wildlife habitat and existing biodiversity that live innocuously within these meadows, hedgerows, valleys, woodlot, forest lands, wetland ponds, and creeks. You will destroy all these acres of carbon sink. There is no need for me to elaborate for you on the repository of nature here, because you already know that. Also, paving over 500 acres of green will not be accepted by the citizens of Oakville as an improvement to our natural heritage system, as is often described by our planning department. The minute the zoning is changed from rural and parkway belt, every inch of this land will be able to be subjected to OMB rulings. Nature rarely wins at the OMB. So do not think the planners will be able to protect nature at the secondary planning stage. Retaining the current zoning is the only way to preserve these lands, and Council does not have the electoral permission to change publicly owned green lands in Oakville. Now, because additional plans, I understand now, are to be considered, I am also requesting Council bring forward in the near future a proposal for an amendment to the official plan of Oakville 2009, specifically to the land use policy cited in Livable Oakville Plan that concerns the special area known as the Merton lands and all the remaining Parkway Belt West lands in Oakville. I am requesting Section D 1913 be amended and replaced by the statement and decree that all Parkway Belt West lands now under such zoning in Oakville will remain as such, and the status will not be amended. The Merton lands must be kept in Parkway Belt, kept in rural zoning, and be protected entirely as natural heritage system and put under Greenbelt designation. These lands must not be removed from the protection of them allotted by the provincial government in 1978. Today, you must choose between green, open, publicly owned nature lands, but ultimately, this decision must go to the citizens of Oakville. So I request you turn away this amendment to approve it to receive the Merton Land Study. This is a request that must go before the citizens of Oakville in the 2014 municipal election. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burton, for your information. Councillor Demoff?
Thank you for coming out, and thank you for your passion on this. The one thing, though, that you said is that we are approving it, and we're not approving it tonight.
No, aren't you approving accepting it?
We're just, it's like a report card. So basically, staff has brought us a report card of where things stand right now, but we're not approving anything tonight. And that's why I was going to, my question, though, was you saw this proposal that came from the 14 Mile Creek Residents Association. What are your thoughts on their proposal?
I don't think that we can give up that much green space in Oakville. So much of our public green space is being paved over. Our natural heritage system has been chopped up with infrastructure. We're losing too much of our biodiversity. This land is protected. The 14 Mile Creek land, we don't want to develop Sawit. We don't want to develop the Parkway Belt lands. We need those lands as open public space, especially to protect our natural heritage.
So I think your point has come across as well as a drawing has, and that was the point.
Well, I'll submit a drawing.
Yeah.
With my proposal to change the Livable Oakville plan that calls for the special use to be development and a small strip of natural heritage land, I will submit a plan for your further consideration. But I understood if you accept this tonight, it means go forward with these plans.
It's those three plans plus all the information that we're receiving tonight, for example, yours and this one, and I'm sure our planning staff would be taking any other comments that come in to take a look at what we should do. We're not deciding anything tonight.
Okay, so you're not going to proceed with those three plans. You will be considering others as they are submitted.
That's right.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Council.
Oh, excuse me. Another question for you. Councillor Duddick?
Thank you, and I appreciate Councillor Demoff raising that. I guess for me, the frustration I have is given that the Ontario Municipal Board, of course, is a product of the province, and that the majority of the lands here are owned by the province. Have you had an opportunity to discuss it with your provincial member in regards to your concerns and where you want this property retained? I'm just concerned that we're part of a process, but the majority of the, what shall I say, push seems to be coming from the provincial level. So I'm concerned about whether or not you've been able to get some assistance or support at the provincial level?
Well, we have had discussions with our MPP, and he seems to think that the plans can be changed and additional plans put forward. But really, when council accepted to go ahead with this in November and then again December, you more or less gave a green light to the province. You should have said no, because it's in the town's jurisdiction to do these planning. Yes, they can override you, but then they'll have to, make special provisions to do that. You should have just said no, is what I feel.
I guess my concern is that without getting all the information from which to make a decision, and as Councillor DeMoff indicated, we are not making a decision, and staff reiterated that again this evening. This is receiving. A decision has yet to be made. I guess my concern is that given that those reports that Councillor Elgar had referenced earlier on in the meeting this evening, it would appear that the province has already gone ahead with considerable studies and background information, so the train has more than left the station as far as they're concerned. Our aspect, we have a certain portion of land that we own, nothing compared to what the province owns in that area. So I just wanted to make sure that there has been some advocacy or discussion taking place at the province, because they're the ones that I think really has to become part of the solution, if that's what you're...
But Oakville Council is the first step to the impediment of paving over these lands. Your decision, it's like Greenbelt. We cannot ask the province to put the Merton lands into Greenbelt, which is similar to Parkway Belt, because town council, the municipal council, must make the request to the province. They can't do it, put your land under Greenbelt. You must ask them to do it. So it would be excellent if you would do that. Ask them to put the Parkway Belts into Greenbelt. It's in your jurisdiction to do that. And you have to do it as first step. It can't be other way around.
Okay, but the Parkway Belt is provincial designation, is it not?
Mm-hmm. But you could ask that it go into Greenbelt.
Okay, thank you.
You could make a proposal to the province to request the Parkway Belt lands be put into the protection of Greenbelt.
To retain their Parkway Belt
as part
designation.
Of the Greenbelt. Yes.
They're the ones who are asking to have it removed, correct?
Yes, so you will ask them, no, we don't want to remove it. As a matter of fact, we want it put into Greenbelt. That is what the citizens of Oakville want.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a case of asking them or telling them that, no, we do not want to see it removed, and it's up to them whether or not they take our advice or not.
No, you can actually petition them to put it in Greenbelt, the same way the trailing valley lands were put into Greenbelt for Glenorchy.
Okay, I'll pursue that with staff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Elgar.
Ms. Burton, thank you for coming out tonight. And I guess, have you seen the letters that were written by Oakville Green and also by the 14 Mile Creek Residents Association? Have you read them?
Yes.
And if it would appear that what they have said is exactly what you would like to have happen.
Well, not exactly. Once they remove any of those zonings, then we lose the protection and we'll be fighting acre by acre for the land. For them to say, well, put this amount of land into development, save that much, then it goes into an acre by acre fight. I'm saying, contrary to what they have asked for or agreed to, I'm saying, no, keep the zoning as is. Once you remove any of it, you can ask for all this mitigation, but the chances of getting it are next to nothing. So I am saying, no, to Fort Mile Creek and to Oakville Green, do not take any restrictions of the protective zoning off these lands as they now stand.
But when I read the letters, actually, it would appear that that's exactly what they have said. They have said the whole 14 Mile Creek stays a natural system. They want the Deerfield Golf Course to remain as a natural system, as it is today, as a golf course. Saw-Wet is outside of the protection now of the Parkway Belt West plan.
But it is still rural lands.
It is, well,
And it doesn't go to the OMB as long as it's rural.
no, it's not rural.
Oh, is it not rural anymore?
It is urban, but urban doesn't mean that you can't have it as private open space for open space. And I think when I read what they're saying also, and you look at the connections, like, it sounds to me like what you are really saying is very similar to what they're basically saying, is that because you need the linkages, and the golf courses actually leave the linkages to let the cross. So I
But we
think you're
would
fairly
like the
close.
Saw-Wet Reserve. There's no need for those lands for another, till the 2031. And as you were saying, there's no law in Canada that says private open lands must be changed out of their zoning. It's a golf course, stay a golf course.
Exactly, or maybe become agricultural, the way they seem to be getting into plowing in that area, so. I
Well, the
thank you.
Saw-Wet Owls do live there still, and they will be driven out.
Thank you
Okay,
very much.
thank you.
But I would like to just reiterate, like, staff have assured us that in fact they will be taking the inputs that they have received very seriously, because they're absolutely not making any decisions, and the maps you're seeing tonight they will not, I would say 99% for sure, will not be the final maps at all.
Okay, we'll get another proposal into them.
There
then.
will, I think they're making a lot of modifications as they get more information.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Thank you, Council.
The next delegation speaking to the same item is Brian Burton.
Welcome, Mr. Burton. Council looks forward to your information.
Evening, Council. My comment is towards Mr. Bird's comment. When I read this report, the first conclusion I came to was there's 3 options on the table. They all involve development, and that is solely the options that's going to happen. Now, I've heard Council say, no, 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 even though it says that way and you could interpret it that way, the fact is we're quite prepared to accept other options. Unfortunately, I would feel a lot more comfortable if that was actually in the report, that there was a 4th option to turn this into natural heritage systems, all or part of it. Now, I say that because when I actually look at this report, I look at the key points, the key facts. And one of the facts is 3 draft options for land uses were prepared with input from town staff, key external stakeholders, including the region. Further down, town staff will evaluate the draft options. I don't know what conclusion you reach, but when someone says to me, we've prepared 3 draft options and we're going to evaluate those 3 draft options, that says to me there is no 4th draft option. I know what they're saying, but what's in writing is not that. So my suggestion is you put it in the report. Take the report back, rewrite it, add option 4, or D as you call it, and that option should be we are going to accept other options, or we're going to put the existing lands into natural heritage systems or part thereof as is suitable. And I would further suggest you need to rewrite the terms of reference to make them tighter so that you're able to do that. That's my one point. My second point is in the terms of options of reference that you have prepared, you have this statement. If I can find it. It is noted that the Halton Natural Area Inventory in 2006 recommended that these lands be evaluated for possible extension of environmental sensitive area number 12. I should preface that by saying the lands they're talking about is not all the Merton lands, but just what they call the 3rd line lands, that they should be evaluated for putting into the natural heritage environmental system, environment ESA area number 12. Now that request has been outstanding for 7 years. My suggestion would be that maybe you want to fulfill that request first, because if it turns out they are environmentally insensitive and should be in area number 12, that's going to really impact how you do the studies. And my argument is it's better to do the studies, the studies beforehand, rather than having to redo them after the fact. I would also argue that if you did the studies and it comes out that no, they're not environmentally sensitive, they shouldn't be in there, then at least you've taken one of the weapons away from the people that are going to take you to the OMB. One of their primary weapons is you didn't do the studies. That's now gone. So I have 2 requests. you tighten up this specification so that you definitely, in hard words, allow other options than the three that are on the table. And number two, you give serious consideration to the 2006 request to put this into the environmental sensitive area number 2, or not, but, you know, do the inventory study as requested in 2006. That's my 2 requests.
Thank you, Mr. Burton. Councillor Duddick?
Sorry, I'll defer to Councillor Elgar first.
That's okay. He just said he can wait.
Thank you very much for the presentations. And I guess the one item that you made reference to is getting some sort of confirmation or certainty regarding what is going forward in terms of consideration of options. You had mentioned the one that you wanted incorporated in any kind of, like we're receiving tonight, so how we would word it would be another thing. My only concern is, what shall I say, restricting it to one option instead of maybe referring some sort of consideration to additional options that may be submitted. Like your wife had mentioned, she'd put forward a plan or a drawing for consideration. I just don't want to circumvent that there may be other options that we're not aware of on this at this time that may in fact be good options as well as to the ones we've received thus far.
Well, that's true, but if you leave it completely open-ended like that, it's never going to end. So right now, I think the argument is it's not open-ended, there's only 3. I'm sorry, but that's the way I read these documents. And quite clearly, especially under your key facts, that's what it says. We're going to evaluate these 3 options. If you don't want to put the 4th one in, maybe you ought to put in some words that before we proceed with evaluating these 3 options, we're going to go to the public and ask them for alternative options that we can narrow down to maybe 1 or 2 more options that we can put in there. Something along those lines. Because I appreciate you don't want to be evaluating 12 options, but 4 or 5 is not unreasonable. And the opportunity for the public to pick their 2 has never been presented. You know, if it has, it sure hasn't shown up here. And if you really tightened it up so that, okay, here's our 4th option, put in natural, I'm making this up as I go along, put in the natural heritage system. Number 5, you know, turn into high-rise condos. You know, it's never going to happen, but you know what I mean? Then it's really tight, and you can then have town planning, you've got clear directions on what to look at. And at that stage in the game, you've taken care of the public's demands for having a proper look at this from an environmental point of view and green space point of view, and you've looked at the owner's demands, who's so desperate for cash, he just wants to sell anything and everything to get his hands on. All right?
Fully appreciate that.
Councillor Elgar.
Mr. Burton, I will ask staff if they think they can tweak the wording so that nobody would read it that there are just 3. Because in fact, I know the staff are not looking at just 3. They're looking at the best ultimate option. To the other is probably your wife when she talked about receiving the report and how it really means something. I just pulled the Halton Natural Areas Inventory 2006 report, and I went to see what we did with that at the region. And in fact, we received it for information. And what you're asking for, that you're right, it was never done of what they're recommending for the section. So, but they have a lot of information in here because it was done by an awful lot of environmental people. So I'll make sure that staff have that too. And it should be at the region.
You're talking this inventory.
I'm talking the Halton Natural Areas Inventory 2006, right. Volume 1 by Jim Dwyer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put some weight on that.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I don't know whether staff even have this report, but I've got the whole thing and I've even got it on disk here. So.
Speaking of staff wants reports, I got the report from the government, all 500 pages of it. I didn't have to sell the confidentiality agreement. I'd be only too happy to turn it over to you without having to sign a confidentiality agreement. And when you read it, you will see what they're planning to do, and it is nothing short of disastrous from our point of view, including putting a road through the park to access the third line lands. I couldn't resist that. Sorry, Brian.
So, I know, I'll defer to you.
I was going to say, Mr. Burton has shown me the report, and I can agree it's what they said. Like, they have many options. Didn't say they're all good, but they didn't leave anything off the table of what they could do. Not saying it'll get done, and I think it might be a good idea if staff did get the reports. If you did not have to sign confidentiality?
No, I did not. I just had to give him a check for $200.
Just 200, perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I think we're all trying to get to the same place, and we may, in good faith, differ about whether or not it's wise to do the study. I continue to believe that it was essential to do the study. And I guess the proof will be in the pudding when we get there. And at the appropriate time, I'll have some suggestions for slight tweaking to the recommendation. And thank you very much for coming tonight.
You're welcome.
Are there any other members of the public with information on this matter for council?
I have my name down.
Bill Robinson, it's your turn. Welcome. We look forward to your information.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, council members. My name is Bill Robinson, and I'm the Vice President of the Deerfield Members Association. I don't know if I can tell you how shocked I was when I went to the Merton study and saw the plans that were being suggested by this study. A, B, and C meant paving over the entire golf courses and green space that was there, and replaced with beautiful office buildings that we can view from the QEW as we drive down the road. And the question that came to my mind, who paid for the Merton study? Did the town pay for it?
Madam Commissioner.
Through you, Your Worship. In the report, actually, on page 102, that was one of the frequently asked questions. And the response indicates that who is undertaking the studies and who is paying for them. The terms of reference for the technical studies, which are attached to this update report, were developed by the town staff, the region, Conservation, Halton, and the other agency staff, as I noted earlier. The study and the scope is set out in those terms of reference and was agreed to by the group, and those are the requirements of the technical studies that are being undertaken. They are being undertaken by a group of consultants retained by the major landowners for the entire study area. When those studies are completed, the town has retained an independent peer reviewer, and the studies will be circulated to that peer reviewer as well as the agencies. The peer reviewer is a team consisting of 20 experts and scientists to review all of that technical work to ensure that it meets all of the requirements in the terms of reference. Additional work will be required to meet all of the study expectations and requirements. So that is set out in full detail in both the report and in the Q&A that's on the website.
Thank you, Madam Planning Director.
Would this not suggest that the developers have a prejudicial input into this study?
We're happy to receive that as a suggestion or whatever, but that's not really, that's a rhetorical question, and I could only give you a rhetorical answer. The method by which we do it is designed to protect the town at the end by having all of their work reviewed by our own retained experts.
Okay. Another question that came up this evening, listening to Ms. Anderson mention that she had no knowledge of the lease. Yet in the pamphlet that was handed out at the Merton Planning Study evening, there's a paragraph that states, in addition, there is a 6-year notice period which the province can initiate at any time before the province can terminate the lease as it applies to those lands. Now that would indicate to me that there is knowledge of the lease.
I could help you out there. That is actually a section of the lands at the east, right at the third line in Brays Lane. That's a special option in the lease. I think when you were hearing from staff, they were not talking about the town's lease. They were actually they were talking about the Deerfield lease itself. They don't have the details, but they do have the details of, and we have the details of the lands that we have under lease. And that provision, it was put in there back in the 1990s.
Okay.
So what you read applies to the land that the town is leasing, and we're completely aware of those leases.
Okay.
And if your club wants to make a copy of its lease available to us, we'd be glad to have it.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we're just a member and not the owner.
Oh, I see. Well, in that case, we may have to continue to just work together as best we can.
Okay. I'd like to tell you a little bit about my feeling of what's happened and what I don't want to see happen. And I'd like to say that I moved to Oakville about 20 years ago because I saw this town as a great place and a great place to raise my family. It had schools, numerous hockey arenas, soccer fields, tennis courts, baseball diamonds, municipal health clubs, and 3 low-cost public golf courses. All this contributed to the health and well-being of our children, our teenagers, our families, and our senior citizens. Many of us now in our senior years, and I'm approaching 68 this year, no longer participate in the more active sports. But we keep our good health and our social friendship by playing a few rounds of golf every week, most of us walking for as long as we can. The membership at Deerfield is not large, but over 90% of us are senior citizens in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s. This physical activity is the main contributor to our reaching this age in such good health. In other words, we need our golf courses. They are important to our health and to our well-being. Golf does not only contribute to our health, it also allows us to socialize with new people and old friends, and teaches us etiquette, honesty, and gamemanship. Deerfield, being a public low-cost course, caters to seniors, adults, parents with their children, and teenagers trying to learn the game. Our local high schools use this course to train and develop players for inter-school competition. It offers tournaments to our many service clubs, charities, corporations, and other organizations, allowing them to come together for a day of activity and fun. Over 100 tournaments are held at the Deerfield course every year, many of them charitable events. The yearly Turnbull Aquarium charity tournament is the largest single donator to the Halton Women's Shelter. Deerfield is a working person's course. On a sunny weekday, we have seen over 300 golfers on the links enjoying this fun activity. Open for 10 months or more a year, Deerfield will accommodate approximately 34,000 golf rounds per year. Why would you want to take this away from us? Oakville once had 3 low-cost public courses, and if this plan goes through, it will now have none. I certainly cannot afford to play at Glen Abbey or any of the other upscale courses, and I don't want to have to drive to Burlington or somewhere else outside of Oakville to play. If we lose Deerfield, our last low-cost public course, Oakville will no longer be such a great place to live for many of us. The town of Oakville's strategic goal is to be the most livable town in Canada. This won't get you there. We're not asking the town of Oakville to spend millions of dollars to build a new golf course from us. It's already there. All we're saying is leave it alone. Don't destroy it. Don't destroy this beautiful habitat of green space with wonderful century oak trees, ponds, forests containing snapping turtles, fish, muskrat, beavers, coyotes, foxes, hawks, ducks, geese, herons, and other flora and fauna that we view every day as we walk this course. This is important to our lifestyle, it's important to our health, it's important to the future of the people that live here in Oakville. All I can ask you is, let's work together to make sure that we don't lose it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robinson, for your information. Councillor Elgar?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, just on the lease of Deerfield itself, the lease at this point expires in March 2022, which means at the end of the 2021, that'll be the end of the golf unless the lease is renewed, which there is no option at this point. However, I would ask you to get as many people as you can to try to lobby the province to in fact keep that as private open space which allows golf courses.
We are in the process of doing that, Alan.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And hopefully I'll still be walking in 2031.
Great. Thanks for coming.
Could you just share with us how many members you have?
We have a very small membership, approximately 90 members. So the majority of people that play at this club are public green fee players.
And I understand that Councillor Byrd might be one of your distinguished members.
Yes, Council Byrd.
I have no equity in the course, but I do play the course and obviously have a concern with the, obviously I believe in general with the, or specifically with the other members, and also, as has been pointed out tonight, in general with the entire community. So I have no pecuniary interest, but I certainly have an interest on the proposal before us.
Thank you, Councillor. So 90 members, are they playing the 34,000 rounds of capacity, or how many rounds, do you know how many rounds are being played?
By the members?
By anybody?
I think it varies quite a bit. We have one member who's 85 years of age, and he plays 7 days a week, and he walks.
I just mean, I'm just trying to understand, you said the capacity is 34,000 rounds a
Yes.
year. I'm just wondering how much of that's being used. That's all I'm asking.
Oh, I see. That's the amount that was played last year.
Thank you. And what's the capacity then?
I don't know. Deerfield actually stays open longer than most other golf courses. As long as there isn't snow on the ground, they'll allow you to play. So it can, in many cases, be open for 10, 11 months out of the year.
So they'd allow me to play snow golf maybe with a tennis ball?
They could.
All right. All right. Well, we both moved here at the same time. We're both the same age, so we got a lot in common. And it distresses me if you thought that any of the work that we're doing requires the golf course to go away. It's a much bigger problem than that. So.
But that's what I heard when I went to the Merton study.
Well, we're not required. Well, let me clear that up. When we put a land use permission on a piece of land, we're ruling out other uses. We're not requiring the golf course to become that. So perhaps there's an opportunity to work more closely together in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for coming.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Thank you very much then. Council, I would propose, let me ask a couple of questions of staff. Madam Planning Director, you heard some concern that the report could be construed, it was said, to mean that you would only study the option A, B, and C. And in your information tonight that you delivered, you indicated that you would also study the 14 Mile Creek Residents Association plan. And you also said that you would be open to others, in fact, looking for others. In order to give comfort to those people who felt that the report restricted you to only those three, I wonder if we might change the recommendation to read that the report PD 4413 dated May 17, 2013 be received, and Council directs staff to continue to develop options to reflect conditions as the studies unfold and the consultation with the public continues. Would that be satisfactory? Council, would that be satisfactory? Councillor Elgar is moving that, I think. All right. Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that carries. Now, that brings you, Council, to item number 7, which is a notice of intention to demolish 273 Burnhamthorpe Road East, the house only. And we have an appearance available to you from Carolyn Van Slichtenhorst, and there she is. And this is, I think, useful so that the public can catch up with, I mean, Council's read all this stuff, but the public who may be watching might find it convenient to hear from Carolyn. So as soon as technical is back in shape, we will turn our attention to Carolyn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. So the item you have before you is on 273 Burnhamthorpe Road East. And we're looking at a notice of intention to demolish that has been submitted just for the house, as you see in the photo there. So the property is located at the northwest corner of Trafalgar Road and Burnhamthorpe Road East, as you can see. And the property is listed on the Heritage Register. It was added in 2009. It contains a historic farmhouse and barn, as well as a drive shed. There's also a contemporary drive shed and storage on the site. And again, the notice of intention to demolish is for the farmhouse only. So staff did a review of the property, as we always do when we have a notice of intention to demolish submitted for a listed heritage property. And through that review, we did find that it does have some physical and design heritage value. It is representative of a late 19th century farmhouse with Gothic Revival influences. It also has some heritage value for its historical associations with the Jones and the Campbell families who farmed the land, as well as the general agricultural development of Trafalgar Township. And finally, it does have some contextual heritage value. It is historically linked to the area and continues to support the rural character of Burnhamthorpe Road. So staff then did a staff report to Heritage Oakville and recommended that the property be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And Heritage Oakville actually made that same recommendation to council as well. So the staff recommendation is before you that a notice of intention to designate be issued for the property at 273 Burnhamthorpe Road East. But I did just want to note that the owners have given staff an update. They've advised staff that they no longer wish to demolish the house. And I do know that they are here tonight and they probably wish to speak to council about that. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Questions? Apparently not. Any members of the public with information for council, including the owners? Welcome, sir. Could you just identify yourself for the clerk and share your information with us?
Good evening, Your Worship, councillors. My name is Robert Canceljak. I'm the son of the owner, Ivan Canceljak. Initially, we had the intention to demolish the site, but after what we went through with the heritage study and all that, we wish to not proceed with that because basically the house pretty much is not worth renting out anymore, so it doesn't make us feasible to maintain it, mainly because of the infrastructure, the lack of infrastructure there. It's only being like heated by electricity, which is very costly these days. There's no running water, so as such, it's hard for us to maintain the property. In talking to Caroline after, they said we could board it up and then we can kind of go from there. We don't have the resources to develop the property, so we would ask that the heritage status not be applied now, because down the road, maybe 5 to 10 years, we wish to hopefully sell it. If it has that status, it might make it a little bit more difficult to sell it. And then whoever buys it maybe can deal with that issue at a later date. If this could be postponed to a later date with whoever's going to develop the land, we would appreciate that. As for also the merits of whether it's heritage, that's also debatable. We can get into that as well.
Right. Thank you for your information. Are there any questions? Councillor Giddings?
Thank you very much. You mentioned that you don't have any plans for renting it out currently. What are your plans for the property?
For the property? Well, right now, when talking to Carolyn, we would board it up to make sure that it's kind of maintained as for the house itself, and that's about it. And we would cut off like electricity and that kind of stuff, except for the, let's say, the pump downstairs. So, but really not. So it wouldn't be livable. We would board it up, but it would still be maintained in some kind of condition.
Could you just tell us how long you've owned the property, or how long your father has owned the property?
Since 1987.
Thank you very much.
Probably, yeah.
I see no other questions. Thank you very much for coming.
Okay. If you want to discuss, I don't know about the merits of whether it's a heritage site, there is also issues with that as well. So.
Okay. Well.
Because there's lots of arguments for and against. So I don't know if, like, I've read the report and like there's lots of, for example, under the Ontario Heritage Act in Section 1. Part 3, in the report it says there are no technical or scientific achievements associated with this property. Section 2, the property is not associated with any significant architect or builder. Part 3, Section 3, the property is a visible, well-known structure in the area but is not considered a major landmark. And speaking with the previous owner, Harley Pickering, who was living there from the 1950s, he notified me that his understanding that the part of the house that runs, let's say, east-west, that was probably built in the 1900s, but the part of the house that runs north-south, in the report it kind of implies that it was built in the 1850s, but in fact it's got poured concrete and was built in the 1920s. And in the report itself it says that pretty much everything has been changed in the building itself, and with respect to the house, it's not something really special. Like there's no beautiful crown molding or 10-inch baseboards, nothing really worthwhile to preserve. The only really thing that would merit some kind of preservation is like the Lake Stone Foundation and the siding, the historic siding that's underneath the asbestos-clad siding that's existing right now. So, and as for who lived there, it was the Jones family and the Campbell family. From what I can see here, they're just farmers who worked at the land. So
There's farmers on council. Be careful how you talk about
okay,
farmers.
I know, but from my understanding, they didn't belong to council though. So, yeah.
I'm just sticking up for farmers.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much for that information. Councillor Bird?
It looks like there's been a number of severances from this original site. Do you recall when the last one was done? It's like I total up, it looks at least 4 or 5 severances.
Well, my father purchased the property off the Pickering family in '87, and that was already severed before that.
Yeah,
so
the Pickering family sever it and stay on site at another location?
What's that?
Did the Pickering family stay on site, sever it, a piece of the property?
I don't think they're there. Is the Pickering family there? Huh? He does. Yeah, the people that had the property both perished, yeah.
Yeah, because it looks like that everyone that's owned it is severed, sold off the major piece.
Yeah.
Except yourself. Now you've got the
like, I think it's gonna be zoned for like commercial down the road.
Right.
I don't know. My father is also open. If you guys want, if town wants to take the property right now and take it to some other historic site, no problem. We have no issues with that.
Certainly.
And the barn as well.
Is it serviced from Trafalgar Road? You know, there's no services, like water and sewer.
No, there's no sewer, no water. There's only electricity. And we have to bring in water tanks for.
And it's down the road, I noticed, from the Biggers property, and I think that had the designation or distinction of being the last farm, bona fide farm in Oakville. Is that correct? The one on Burnham, that would be just west of this site, Bigger?
I'm not that familiar with that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ilger?
Thank you. When you say there's no electricity, what is that?
No, there's electricity.
No, he said there is.
There's only electricity. There's no natural gas. There's no running water.
But then you talked about a pump house. Where's the pump house?
No, it's not a pump house. It's got a pump in the basement to pump out water if there's excess, like a sump pump or whatever.
Sump pump.
Yeah, it's just a sump pump.
Thank you.
It's like your place. Might not be as good as your place, actually. I'm not sure. Anyone else? All right, thank you, sir, very much for your time. Carol and I, on behalf of council, I would just ask if staff maintain their recommendation.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the staff does maintain the recommendation. That's up to council what you wish to do tonight, but that's been staff's recommendation, is to designate the property.
Thank you. Councillor Duddick.
Thank you. Through you to staff, for the benefit of those who, unlike Councillor Giddings and myself, who have served on the committee, designation does not get based solely on the merit of who lived there or whether that person was famous. There's different aspects associated with the merits of designation. Is that not correct?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dudek. I'll just go back just to this slide. When we're looking at whether a property actually merits designation under the Heritage Act, we looked at three basically sections of Ontario Heritage Regulation 906, and those are physical and design attributes, historical attributes, and contextual attributes. So we did find that there was heritage value in each of these categories. The Act requires that you meet one of the criteria. We found that it meets more than one to meet the Heritage Act. So we're looking at the three different categories. We believe it merits the heritage designation.
Okay, and I know that at committee level, you did share with the committee the fact that, and with the applicant when they had done their presentation, that staff in the past have worked extensively with similar applicants who are wanting to sell properties that they felt having designation was a hindrance to them, and we were able to preserve through the development process even though they have designation on it, and you gave reference to several other sites that we've been able to secure. So it's not the way the person sometimes does perceive, and I can appreciate that. They see it as a hindrance. We see it as a preservation of our heritage.
Yes, there are other developments happening in North Oakville right now that do include heritage homes such as this one. So specifically historic farmhouses that are being retained within larger new developments.
I know that Councillor DeMoff and I have the Empire Communities at the top of Kerr and Spears there, and there's 2 houses that are being preserved on that, and that's a very intense development, so it can be done. So I would be pleased to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Dudek. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. That brings us to report number 8. And Susan Shepherd is going to walk us through a synopsis of the Planning Services Department recommendation for heritage incentives. And this is something that followed on from our creation of our new Heritage District. And thank you, Councillor. Ms. Shepherd, Council is all ears. Honest.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and good evening to you all members of Council and Mr. Mayor. I am very pleased to be here before you tonight to discuss the proposed Heritage Incentive Program, which, as the Mayor mentioned, does stem from a number of recent studies and ongoing initiatives at the town. Just to give you a little bit of background, grant programs, heritage incentives aren't new to Oakville. The municipality did participate in a number of programs that were funded by the provincial government in the 1980s up till about the mid-1990s. These included, there was a heritage loan program, and there was also a program called the Designated Property Grant Program, which provided matching grants to property owners of up to $3,000 for approved restoration works. The property actually that you can see on the slide right now received a grant to restore their front porch back in the 1990s. When provincial funding ended in the mid-90s, a number of municipalities across the province decided to offer their own municipally funded incentive programs. And over the years, the number of municipalities that offer these types of things has greatly expanded. The chart that's on the screen just shows a few of the municipalities that offer heritage incentive programs, and there's a more fulsome comparison in the staff report attached as Appendix C. It's not a complete list of all municipalities with incentive programs, but it gives you a larger list. And for example, the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport has recently confirmed that there are 39 municipalities in the province that participate in heritage tax programs alone. The comparison chart is meant to provide some context to the variety of programs that are available and the varying amounts that municipalities budget for these types of programs. And the 3 main types of programs are heritage grants, heritage loans, and heritage tax relief. An outline of each one of these programs is included in the staff report. A fulsome discussion is in Appendix D, and it's also included within the body of the staff report on pages 154 to 156, directly comparing each program to the other to identify benefits and constraints. In Oakville, the topic of heritage incentives has been floating around since these programs were cut by the province in the mid-90s, but no action has been taken. In 2010, the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee to Council had a discussion on the various types of incentives, and they discussed which one would be the most appropriate for Oakville. In addition to this, we've had several recent town studies, policies, and programs that have called for an investigation into the types of heritage programs that are available and how they could work for Oakville. The Downtown Oakville Heritage Conservation District study, the most recent of those, which was completed and approved this past February, included recommendations from our consulting team on how to implement the district, and the recommendation for a heritage grant program was one of those implementation suggestions, and it's attached as Appendix B in your report. Heritage planning staff, supported by the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee, believe that there are many benefits to heritage incentive programs. Heritage incentives help to build a more positive view of heritage, especially for those who are considering designation, purchasing a designated property, or for those who live within heritage conservation districts. It provides a trade-off or a balance against some of the restrictions that can come with heritage designation and assists with the costs of appropriately restoring and maintaining heritage properties. Heritage incentive programs can help foster interest in new heritage designations. For example, when the Provincial Heritage Grant Program was offered in the town of Oakville, between the years 1987 and 1994, we passed 94 heritage designation bylaws, which is certainly the bulk of our Part 4 properties. There were also 2 heritage districts designated at that time. Heritage incentives help to promote neighborhood revitalization and make heritage districts more livable and affordable for existing and new residents. They can also promote sustainability, with programs encouraging restoration rather than replacement. Less waste is sent to landfills. My point is that the entire Oakville community benefits from heritage conservation, not just individual property owners. Heritage incentives show owners of designated properties that we value and appreciate their commitment as stewards of these pieces of our local heritage. These stewards, property owners, are required to maintain and repair the heritage features of their properties to appropriate standards. And while every property owner knows that they have to pay for upkeep and maintenance on their property, the owners of designated heritage properties pay a premium price to make sure that the work is done appropriately to conservation standards. Financial benefits of these types of improvements are shared with neighboring properties, especially within our heritage conservation districts, areas that are noted for their charm and character. So, why a grant program for Oakville? I've mentioned that there are 3 types of programs, but the report certainly does recommend that we implement a grant program for Oakville. Grant programs do tend to be easier to administer from a staff perspective and are less restrictive to property owners. There are no easement agreements required or liens placed on the property, such as there are with heritage loans. Grant programs can target and control the types of restoration projects that the municipality would be funding, and funding can be held until the work is properly completed and inspected to make sure that what we're investing in is what we committed to. The results of heritage grants are very tangible and measurable, and they create a partnership between the municipality and the property owner. So the highlights of the proposed program as presented in the report state that we would propose that the program be instituted as a 3-year pilot, and this would provide hopefully enough time to evaluate the success of the program and then to return to council with a report with those results. We suggest that both types of properties, Part 4 that's individually designated and Part 5 properties within heritage conservation districts be eligible, not listed properties. We're suggesting that grants up to a matching 50-50 contribution from the property owner and the municipality be allowed to a maximum of $15,000. We're also proposing an annual budget of $80,000 per year. And this amount is based on the recommendations of the Downtown Oakville Heritage Conservation District study consultants, who suggested a number between $60,000 and $120,000 as appropriate for a municipality of our size and with our heritage resources. It's also based on comparison with other municipalities who are known leaders in heritage conservation. The good news though, of this recommendation for $80,000 per year of a 3-year pilot is that a part of that can be covered through funds which are existing and committed in the Heritage Reserve Fund, which has approximately $165,000 available. Therefore, an additional $75,000 would need to be considered during the town's budget process. We anticipate that this would be a competitive program and that projects would be completed within 2 years. This should provide a good amount of projects to measure in the pilot review, which again would then come back to Council for an entire review of the program. Therefore, the recommendation before you is that Council directs staff to implement a Heritage Grant Program as outlined in the report, and that the financing and implementation for the Heritage Grant Program be considered through the town's budget review process. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. You're going to have some. Councillor Bird and Councillor Giddings, and I have one right off the bat when I see the wording. In part one, you say Council directs staff to implement, and in part two, you say that implementation be considered through the budget review process. So I'm wondering if you might want a different word in part one than implement. And maybe during questions, everyone on the front bench can contemplate this vocabulary question, and I'll turn now to Councillor Bird and then Councillor Giddings.
Actually, I'm not opposed to what you're proposing here. In fact, I'm in support of it. In fact, we're actually reinstating a program we had a number of years ago. And if memory serves, at that time, I think I was on it, that was the genesis for the Heritage Committee to hand out the money and make sure that they were doing the work according to, at that time, the plan. I thought we were giving out $1,500 per application of grants from Heritage. I'm just trying to, and that's, I guess, 25, 30 years ago, you can, and I can't remember, maybe I have to refresh my memory, why we stopped doing it because the Heritage districts expanded, the number of heritage homes increased, but the grant money went from what we were giving out before, and I'm a little foggy, but I think it was $1,500 per project you would approve on a project, and it went to zero. So now we're back and saying we've now got fourth heritage thing that we'll come up with a plan. It was reasonably well taken up all the time, I must admit. Yes. I don't think it was a problem of not interest. It just sort of didn't make, I guess, a budget cut. But there must be some paper trail on what happened and what was successful the last time. And all I think we have to do is build on that. The committee is still there, the Heritage Review Committee. You've got some people and the grant program was the format. So why not just update the amount of monies and see what the take-up is, because it was successful. I can't believe it won't be successful now. We got more people interested in it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bird, all the records that I can find indicate that the previous programs that Oakville was involved with, the funding came from the province.
They got some money under, I think at that time it was called the Pride Program at that point in time, but the Pride Program was basically directed at restoring downtowns. So we kind of created the heritage districts. There wasn't many in the town, and we, I guess, got away with it for a couple of years, but there was only a couple of heritage buildings actually in the downtown that applied for money that I was aware of.
Again, through you, Mr. Mayor, the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage Conservation District, which was passed by Council in 1987, actually does reference the grant programs that were available at that time. And they were the provincially funded program, and they included the amounts flat out in the district program, and it referred to the loans being available for up to $7,500 and grants available up to $3,000. If there were programs after that, I'm not aware of the institutional history, but you are correct that the Heritage Committee was very involved in approving those grants, and we think that the program that we're putting forward before you today builds on a number of I guess the same kind of goals and objectives that program had, and we're bringing it up to today's standards.
Well, that was the grant program coupled with the Heritage reviewing redevelopment plan. That was the shtick, if you will, to get people to support the recommendations, if you will, of the Heritage Review Committee. So it kind of worked hand in glove here. And the Heritage Committee would endorse the final product, and they would then cut them a check, and move on to the next one. But it worked reasonably well, and it just stopped. Maybe the province pulled the pin, and we just decided to abandon it.
Thank you, Councillor Byrd, for your kind words about the proposal. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In terms, you mentioned the province a couple of times. I take it that the likelihood of the province getting back into this grant process is fairly slim?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is very slim. We've been waiting for almost 20 years, and I don't think it's going to be coming along the pipeline anytime soon.
Probably a good time for this then. Can you describe some of the types of work that would be done under a process like this?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Giddings. The types of work that we'd be looking at approving through this program would be restoration works. Therefore, replacement and new construction would not be considered eligible for this grant program. So what we're really concerned with is the protection and restoration and rehabilitation of existing heritage features. And so, for example, if we had a heritage permit come in for replacement of windows in a heritage building, which is a hot topic for us these days, the property owner would be considered eligible to apply for the grant program if they were considering a restoration of their heritage windows, but not if they were considering a complete replacement of their heritage windows. Likewise, other projects that could be considered would be restoration of heritage porches, repairs that would be considered specialized repairs, so not normal day-to-day maintenance, but for heritage buildings there are specific requirements for repairs to, say, heritage masonry to make sure that brickwork is repaired appropriately, same with heritage roofs, foundations, etc.
All right, thank you. In terms of, is this residential, commercial, both?
Both.
All right, so some of the commercial buildings on Lakeshore would, or other areas would certainly be involved.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, definitely, for sure, certainly, all of those answers work. I mean, as I referenced, one of the reasons why this study or this report is before you today is a direct result of the Downtown Oakville Heritage Conservation District study, which did strongly recommend that council consider implementing a grant program. We feel that a grant program would be beneficial to all property owners who have committed to being stewards of our local history, whether they be commercial or residential.
And in terms of the process, will this come to the Heritage Committee, or would staff decide at whatever point of the year that the requests come in terms of allocating the grants?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, program details would be further worked out through the town's policy and procedure subcommittee so that we have a very set outlined procedure for taking in grant applications. We anticipate it would be a once-a-year deadline to ensure that grants are competitive, that we're making sure that the money goes to the projects that are most needed, and that they would go back through the Heritage Oakville committee, either the committee as a whole or potentially a subcommittee of Heritage Oakville, but they would certainly be involved in recommending grants for approval.
So you'll come back to us with that, as well as we had talked to committee in terms of whether it's 50-50, 60-40 split.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly something like that would again be worked out through the fine-tuning of the program details. I would suggest that we would be looking at a matching up to 50-50, but that if there were, say, restoration projects that were worth more than $30,000, we wouldn't, consider them not eligible for the program simply because we couldn't match a 50-50 contribution. Likewise, if we receive a lot of applicants in any particular year, we could certainly look at making the contributions from the municipality slightly lower in order to accommodate more grant recipients.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you very much. You've given me the vocabulary change I was looking for. So, Council, I think subject to further ideas, we might be better to change one to read, subject to staff's reaction here, that Council directs staff to develop program details for a heritage grant program as outlined in, and then that leaves 2 to stand on its own as it was. So you're fine with that, I take it? Councillor Adams, let's find out where you are on this.
Thank you very much. I wondered if, could you help us understand what the indicators of success of the program will be? So if we go through the program and we start giving out grants 2-3 years down the road, what is it that we should see to say, yeah, it's working, let's keep going?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Adams. We have yet to design the program review, but I anticipate that it would, of course, look at a background of the heritage permits that were approved and the whether the actual projects were successfully completed to the standards and passed town inspection. I think part of it would probably include a questionnaire to grant program recipients to ensure that the grant program is working as, I guess, as customer service oriented as possible, but we'd also be looking at the amount of restoration programs that would be, restoration projects that would be happening as a direct result of this grant program that wouldn't be happening without it in place. And so that could be included as part of the questionnaire to ask property owners whether or not this program, their project would have been completed with or without the grant program. Those are just some initial ideas.
Mr. Hanna.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Adams. The one thing I would also add is we would probably be tracking the number of designated properties, the increase of which we would see through the program. If you notice in the background section of this report, there was a considerable number of designations that took place when the province had their grant programs available.
So we look at a baseline of where we are today and how it's changed over the last few years without a program, and then see what it looks like with a program? Okay. Yep. And why $80,000 and why 3 years?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we felt that 3 years was an appropriate time frame. If we're requiring program applicants to complete the work within 2 years, we think we'll be able to get through the first 2 years, and maybe even people from the third year, depending on how intense their restoration projects are, so that we can give council a more complete idea of how the project is actually functioning. In terms of the dollar amount at $80,000, that was arrived at, as I mentioned, the consultants for the Downtown Oakville Heritage Conservation District study had suggested an amount between $60,000 and $120,000 as suitable for a municipality of our size and with our existing heritage resources. We also looked at the maximum amount that we'd be potentially offering to grant applicants at $15,000, and we wanted to be able to have a variety of projects approved through the program, and we felt that $80,000 was appropriate, especially again in comparison to other municipalities of our size with our types amount of heritage resources.
Thank you. And one final question: in the report, I'm not sure I can find the page now. It talks about the funding, the financing of the $80,000 per year, and it includes discussion of our existing reserve funds. And then it goes on to say, but we should use those for years 2 and 3. Why that statement? Why not reverse it, use those funds up front, and see if we can get additional funds from other project cases for the third year?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and I may rely on my manager for some additional information, but the reason why we had suggested that the $75,000 commitment be considered through this year's budget process is because we can't direct future councils to consider these budgetary items, and we did want to ensure that the program would run for a minimum of 3 years. It is certainly possible that more monies are directed into the Heritage Reserve Fund, and at that point in time we would hope that they would just roll over into the next year. I don't know if Mr. Hanna has anything to add to that.
Through your worship to Councillor Adams, Sue has provided a very, very good answer, and the primary response is, of course, that we can't direct our future council beyond their term to budget. But I would suggest that in all likelihood, the Heritage Reserve will be used up front. And part of the report, as you notice, there is the opportunity to assess additional funding sources. And our director this evening also pointed out that Livable Oakville, under the bonusing section, the density bonusing, does allow funds to be allocated towards heritage. So that may be one of the solutions.
Thank you very much. I support the revised recommendation that we've got, and the discussion we've had about the continue the discussion, but I'll just speak loud. Oh, I'm back on. There you go, I'm back on here. No.
I'm back.
Only you're back on. I look forward to continuing the discussion at the Budget Committee, and the route that you were describing, I think, is likely the one I would support.
Councillor, I was at a meeting in another municipality where I discovered their mics are timed, and they give you 3 minutes, and then there's no clock, it just turns off, and you're done. Councillor Demoff, it's your turn.
Thank you. The Heritage Reserve Fund, what was the intent of that, and what has it been used for in the past? If we're drawing the money out of it and not leaving anything there. So I'm just wondering if you could give me some background on what the intent of that was to be and when we've used it.
Thank you. Through your worship to Councillor Demoff, the Heritage Reserve Fund has actually never been drawn on. It was set up, I believe, in 2009 or 2010 when the town collected some funds from the Davis Minardi Corporation as part of I guess, an agreement to commemorate the existing heritage house that had been on their property that they were developing, and that this $40,000 would be used in the future to help protect and preserve other heritage properties within the town. And so the additional $125,000 in the Heritage Reserve Fund it's actually not quite there yet, but it has been committed from another developer. Somewhat similar situation where there was a loss of a heritage property, and these funds are being provided by the developer to help contribute to the preservation of Oakville's historic character. And so staff were required to follow up with council with a report on what to do with that money in the Heritage Reserve Fund, and so that's one of the reasons why we're here before you tonight.
Thank you.
It's all good. Thank you very much. In the absence of further questions, any members of the public with information on this matter? I'll look for a motion. Councillor Giddings. Councillor Giddings moves the recommendation, and I understand we've all agreed to the revised wording that I read. Councillor Duddick?
I'd just like to add our thanks for all the hard work. I know you've had a really heavy load this year, what with the downtown heritage district, and the fact we're able to make such great headway in terms of preserving our heritage property is due to the works that you're doing in terms of not only the downtown heritage district, but reports such as this, that you're coming back in such a timely manner, so thank you.
Yes, and Council, we've just mounted the Prince of Wales Award, that giant bronze plaque on the corner outside the room here. So it's a good, auspicious omen for tonight. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is adopted too. Now, Council, we are now going to hear from Joanna Weiss, our Assistant Town Solicitor, who's going to update us on the criteria regarding Committee of Adjustment appeals. I know you've read the report, but the public who may be watching will certainly be interested to hear this. Joanna, we are all ears.
Sorry? There is none. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, members of council. I'm just going to give you some highlights from this report. As you know, when decisions are made by the Committee of Adjustment, there's only two types of decisions, that for minor variances and for severances. Those decisions can be appealed, and this report deals with procedures and guidelines that staff use to evaluate those types of appeals and how confidential reports come forward to you, and to provide you with some clarity as to that, as well as give you some guidance as to how to evaluate those types of reports as they come forward. So those two types of decisions, minor variances and severances, have specific statutory requirements that must be met in order for them to be approved by the Committee of Adjustment or by a council if they so chose. Those tests, for the minor variances, there's the 4 tests within Section 45(1) of the Act. And for severances, similar to plans of subdivision, that's under 5124 of the Act, and the matters that regard must be had for those matters.
when a decision is made, those go to the Ontario Municipal Board, and the Municipal Board looks at those decisions as a de novo hearing. So they look at those right as if they were the first ones to make that decision. So in terms of appeals, when they are made to those, to the Committee of Adjustment decisions, staff then look at those appeals as whether or not they meet those tests, and they look at the matters that are set out on page 181 of the agenda tonight. And there's essentially 5 criteria that we look at and evaluate before we recommend either appealing or defending an appeal or taking no position on a matter. And that is whether or not the decision has broader impacts for the town, whether there's the decision's not in keeping with the town's bylaws or the official plan, whether or not there's going to be an undesirable precedent that would be set, whether or not the committee failed to impose conditions that are appropriate for the severance or the minor variance, and whether or not the committee, in making its decision, made an error in law. So when those decisions are evaluated, we would bring a report forward to you that would be in camera, which I'll speak to in a minute, for your evaluation in terms of whether or not those 5 criteria have been met or not. Now, in particularly of the last 2, whether or not the committee failed to impose a condition that staff have recommended, or if there's been an error in law, under those 2 circumstances, it might actually be the case that staff are bringing forward a recommendation to appeal, where the council is actually appealing the decision of its own committee of adjustment. A unique circumstance arises in that case. The appeals must be done within a certain time frame, and unfortunately there's not often opportunity to get to you to seek your instructions before that appeal period has passed. So in those circumstances, what happens is an appeal is filed with the Ontario Municipal Board that is pending ratification. So what might happen is I would file an appeal on behalf of council that has an asterisk basically saying that this is subject to approval of the council. I would be coming to you immediately with a report that sets out the reasons why that decision was appealed, and you would instruct staff whether or not you would wish to proceed with the appeal, in which case I would advise the OMB that we are proceeding and provide them with the council resolution to that effect. Or if you were to say, you know what, that's not something we want to appeal, then I would ask the Ontario Municipal Board or advise them that we are withdrawing that appeal. Now, in terms of the in-camera confidentiality of these items, Section 239 of the Act does provide the reasons or reasons why council may go into closed session in order to evaluate items, as I'm sure you know. These types of items are always subject to solicitor-client privilege, but also they attract litigation privilege. So the reports that we provide to you are confidential, and whether they're dealt with on consent or if you wish to discuss the items, they are properly held in camera if that's your choice. And so is the information that is provided in those confidential reports about the background of what's happened. So when these reports come forward, as you're aware, there is no complimentary open session report that is done with it. It's just a closed session report. But as you're aware, once you've made the decision on those closed session items, that does become public. So your instructions to me to proceed with an appeal or to withdraw or to take no position on an appeal by a neighbor, those do become public. That is just the resolution. The confidential report remains confidential. So what's being proposed for you today that's being recommended by the legal department is that the criteria that are contained in this report be that council have regard to those items when making decisions, and that those reports that are coming forward to you will clearly set out those criteria when advising you and making recommendations on future appeals.
unless there's any questions, those are.
Thank you very
comments for
much.
you.
Let's see how
Okay.
many questions you've generated. Not even from, oh, Councillor Adams jumps in. Councillor Khan may follow. He's a lawyer after
No,
all.
I have no questions. I saw the quiet chamber, and I was going to move the staff recommendation.
All right, well, a motion certainly in order. Thank you very much, Ms. Wise, for the report.
Thank you.
We'll have a chance later on to practice a little bit of it, I know. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that is carried. So, council, two confidential discussion items right in front of us now. Councillor Dudek.
Actually, I was going to give you a motion for approving the Heritage Advisory Committee meeting.
All righty. I'll take that. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Item 10 is approved. Back to confidential discussion, items C1 and C2. Councillor Adams?
I'll give you the motion for C1.
All right. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's adopted. C2? Councillor Johnston? Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? C2 is also approved. A motion to rise and report to council. Councillor Lapworth, thank you. I rise and report the Committee of the Whole has met and made recommendations on consent items 1 and 2, public hearing items 3, 4, and 5, discussion items 6, 7, 8, and 9, confidential discussion items C1 and C2, and advisory committee minutes, item 10, as noted by the clerk. Might I have a mover and seconder for my report? Councillor Dudek, thank you. Councillor Adams, thank you. All in favor? Opposed, if any? The report is adopted. Council, that brings us to new business of an emergency, congratulatory, or condolence nature. Is there any? I have a few little tidbits for you. Halton Regional Police Chief Tanner sent me a note today following up on his recent presentation to us to update us on crime. He says that the first 4 months of 2013 are showing a substantial reduction in crime, again, for the third year in a row. He also reports proudly that the clearance rate for crime is up substantially year over year, and that translates, that bottom line's this way: fewer crimes, more catches. So I'm sure we all extend our congratulations and appreciation to him. I was asked earlier today by a sort of electronic news media in Oakville about some recent crimes involving getting into homes, if there was anything that people could do, and I said yes, of course, and I thought maybe I would use this platform to share that with anyone else who may be watching. Use good locks on your doors and windows. Pay attention to sight lines and lights around your home. Know your neighbors and look out for each other. This is the distillation of the several presentations that the police have given to public meetings of residents during previous times when there's been concerns about break-ins and all. Secondly, I thought I would congratulate you, the members of council. Our final tax rate has now been determined as a result of all the shifts in the tax assessments of the region. And our tax increase lies at 1.6%. And why am I congratulating you on that? Here's why. The City of Toronto tax increase was 25% more. So just reflect on that for a second. The City of Burlington tax increase was 63% more. And the City of Mississauga's tax increase was 94% more. I don't know if you're in the habit of giving yourselves a hand, but you can certainly try to pat yourselves on the back. I think that's a terrific record. And on one final note, I want to thank the Toronto Star and congratulate them for having done the following. Build, who, as you know, spends a lot of time trying to keep us from raising our development charges in order to get the cost of growth off of the taxpayer, is publishing yet another report tomorrow complaining that fees are too high. And the Star called me to tell me that although the report was embargoed, which is a technique people use when they try to get a one-sided report into the newspaper, the Star was proactively calling ahead to ask for our view on this claim by Bill. And I appreciated that very much, and I thought I'd share with you the 7 things that I said. First, I said the prices of a home, the price is set by the market. And if we had lower fees, the builders would have a bigger profit, not a lower price for the consumer. And we can show that all across the GTA, where the same home on the same size lot fetches money according to market and not according to fees. Second, I said that since 1997, we've not been allowed to collect all the costs of growth because the Progressive Conservative government of that time gutted the Development Charges Act. And they introduced the idea of a construed benefit to existing residents from growth. They introduced a very pernicious 10-year trailing average of what you have in terms of what you can build, which means that you're always, that's basically a formula for a downward spiral. And they also introduced exempt costs, such as hospitals and administrative quarters and so on, and quite a few other things that can't be charged to growth. Third, I said, it's funny that they complain about how high the fees are when they pay thousands of dollars per home in voluntary charges on top of the development charges and taxes about which they're complaining. I know one city in the GTA where I believe the voluntary charges that they're paying extra might be as much as $7,000. And of course, if the NHL arena in Markham goes ahead, which is some developers are behind, they've promised to pay an extra $10,000 on top of existing development charges. And so I said, that proves that their complaint is a very flexible complaint. They only complain when they want to. Fourth, I said that our development charges, as high as they are, and we do actually try to make them as high as, I believe we're united in our desire to have the highest in the province. And we don't always, because many other cities have now realized what we've realized, and they've begun following our example and trying to charge as much as possible of the costs of growth to the developers. Despite the fact that ours are so high, I pointed out that the last subdivision of about 600 homes in Oakville sold out in 6 days. And units in that subdivision were flipped only 3 months later for more than $140,000 profit. And that says, the economist in me says, that shows you just how much headroom there is in this market. And fifth, I said that at the town and the region, because we're a 2-tier municipality, our total loss to the Development Charges Act, the money we aren't collecting that we wish we could, is probably about $20 million a year. And sixth, I gave as an example, I said there's another problem entirely, which is that many cities under-collect for the costs of growth. I know one city with $240 million of infrastructure to build to service growth who collected only $80 million. That means there's $160 million going to their existing taxpayer. At this point, the reporter said, why on earth would anybody do that? Why would anybody under-collect? And I said, because many councillors and councils tend to be under the control or influence of developers. And I directed her to the work of Professor McDermott at York University, who has documented that over the last quite some time, as well as the videotape of the meeting of the developers in Calgary, where they got together at the country club and talked about how they needed to defeat a bunch of Calgary councillors. They said that Mayor Nenshi was too popular to defeat, but if they could get a majority of council, then it wouldn't matter that they didn't defeat the mayor. And I know that story about the tape has been in her paper twice, and of course it's been on global TV as well, and still on their website. And anyone who hasn't seen it, I urge to look at it, because it's pretty riveting to hear them talk about how important it is for them to control municipal councils. So with that, that's all the new business that I have for you. Councillor Lapworth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had the privilege on last Saturday of attending a young lady's 100th birthday party. Mabel King, a resident of Ward 4, she's currently at the West Oak Village Long-Term Care Centre. And I was very impressed by the fact that she took me to one side and showed me the certificate that she had received from the Queen Elizabeth, also the plaque she received from the Prime Minister of Canada, and also the Premier of Ontario. And about 150 of her friends, relatives, children, great-grandchildren were all there, and it was an amazing afternoon. And I think I would share that with the residents of Oakville, because not too many people reach 100. But I did invite her to my 100th birthday party.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can tell you, I was with Hazel last week, and yeah, she gives every sign of being planning to go to 200. And we should all be so ambitious. If there's no other things, then a motion, a mover and seconder for consideration of the bylaws. Councillor Elgar, Councillor Adams, thank you. This would be for bylaws 41, 48, 53, and 58, the confirmatory bylaw. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? It's carried. It's been great working with you. Thank you for your time and attention. And we've completed our work, so we're adjourned.